Welcome to this explainer. You know, Jesus talked about money far, far more than most people realize. But here's the thing, one of his core teachings on wealth and greed, it was incredibly uncomfortable. Today, we're going to explore why his words were way more radical than your standard financial advice and how they completely flipped the script on everything we think we know about contentment, ambition, and security.
So let's just dive right into it. What was this dangerous teaching? What did Jesus actually say that was so challenging to his ancient listeners and honestly still so provocative for us today? We usually picture Jesus teaching about love and peace, right? But when it came to material possessions, specifically right in the middle of his famous Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 6, his words were literally designed to pull the mental rug out from under his hearers. It's a teaching that actively confronts our absolute deepest desires for control and safety.
But to really understand this teaching, we've got to clear the slate of some super common myths. Here are 3 things Jesus never said about money. He didn't condemn wealth itself. He never claimed that being rich automatically disqualifies you from heaven. I mean, we see wealthy, righteous figures all over the biblical texts, like Abraham and Solomon. And he never said tithing was irrelevant. The danger he was pointing out wasn't just having money. It was the love of money. That's the thing that puts us at serious risk of wandering from our faith and, as the texts say, piercing ourselves with many griefs. The real shocker arrives when we look at the original Aramaic word Jesus used, mammon. This reveals that Jesus didn't view money as just some neutral medium of exchange. It's not just the coins or dollar bills sitting in your pocket. He purposefully used this specific term to personify wealth as an active master, a rival deity demanding our devotion. The sources actually point out that there were plenty of Greek words available for neutral property or money, but Jesus intentionally chose a word that paints wealth as a superhuman, burdensome ruler offering totally false promises of security. French philosopher Jacques Ellul points out something absolutely fascinating here. He notes that Jesus personifies mammon as a sort of god, a force competing with God for our souls. Now, what's wild about this is that Jesus rarely used deifications or personifications. The fact that he does it here makes this elevation of money to a spiritual power highly exceptional. What he's revealing is that money isn't just an inanimate tool we use to buy groceries, right? It's a power. It's an active spiritual entity that literally seeks to dominate us and dictate our core values. And that brings us to the ultimate showdown, God versus mammon. Jesus sets up an uncompromising binary in Matthew 6:24, declaring that you cannot serve 2 masters. You'll either hate the one and love the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon. Talk about intense cognitive dissonance for our modern assumptions. His original audience probably expected him to say you cannot serve God and Satan, but instead he contrasts God with personified wealth. It's a total denial of dual loyalty, asserting that the pursuit of material accumulation is fundamentally 100% incompatible with the kingdom of God. So how does this rival power actually operate? Well, mammon functions as a surrogate deity by tricking the human heart through 3 progressive psychological and spiritual deceptions. Our sources highlight an amazing framework from Archbishop Justin Welby's book, Dethroning Mammon, which perfectly breaks down how this power slowly blindsides us completely without us even realizing we're serving it. Let's walk through these 3 deceptions. Deception number 1, valuing only what can be seen. We start calculating our worth entirely on liquid assets and bank balances, completely missing the true value of things that just can't be counted. One of our sources shares this incredibly striking story of a wealthy man going through a divorce. He knew his exact liquid asset value down to the penny because he literally calculated it every single week just to bask in his wealth. Yet, while he sat there counting his money, his marriage, something of infinitely greater, unmeasurable value, was completely slipping away. Mammon tricks us into prioritizing the tangible over the eternal. And that perfectly sets up the second deception, believing in an economy of scarcity. Welby points out that fear is a powerful tool of mammon. It establishes this hermeneutic of suspicion, which is really just a fancy way of saying we start looking at the world and especially at strangers in need and asking, okay, what are they trying to get out of me? Mammon preaches that resources are rapidly running out. It convinces us there isn't enough to go around, which causes us to panic, to hoard, and to grasp super tightly to our possessions instead of just living with open hands. Then we hit deception 3, the illusion of absolute ownership. This tricks us into believing we are the ultimate owners of our wealth. We start saying things like, well, it's my money to dispose of however I choose. But the sources warn us, and this is key, if we believe we own our money, money can eventually own us. When we view wealth as a personal possession rather than a resource we're simply stewarding on God's behalf, we become totally blind to how that money is controlling our decisions, causing us massive anxiety and basically dictating our entire life's direction.
So, how does Jesus resolve this massive conflict? Back in Matthew 6, he contrasts the highly vulnerable treasures of earth against the subversive, radical act of storing treasures in heaven. The original Greek phrasing literally translates to, "Do not treasure up treasures on earth." You have to remember, in the ancient world, wealth was stored in expensive garments, crops, or metals, all of which could be eaten by moths, destroyed by rust, or straight up stolen by thieves. Earthly storage systems are fundamentally insecure. Heavenly treasures, on the other hand, they are secure, eternal, and totally unfailing. This realization builds into an entirely different worldview. It's a massive paradigm shift into an economy of abundance. Jesus completely rejects Mammon's fear of scarcity by pointing to a God of just ludicrous generosity. He tells his listeners, hey, look at the birds of the air, look at the lilies of the field. They don't toil, they don't hoard their stuff in barns, yet God beautifully provides for them. The big takeaway here is that in God's economy, there is more than enough for everyone's need, just not for human greed.
The 18th century minister John Wesley actually models how to break this dependency beautifully. He famously said, "When I have any money, I give it away as quickly as possible, lest it find a way into my heart." Think about that for a second. Our sources note that Wesley lived on a fixed, modest amount of money his entire life. As his income grew massively from his writings, his standard of living stayed exactly the same, and he just gave the rest away. He ultimately gave away tens of thousands of pounds. He basically treated wealth as a tool for the kingdom rather than a personal safety net.
So how do we dethrone Mammon today? We can systematically defeat this deceptive power through concrete behavioral habits of stewardship. It requires intentional action. We have to value what cannot be measured, reject the fear of scarcity, and actively embrace God's abundance. We have to treat wealth as a gift designed to serve others and practice radical generosity. In the kingdom of God, wealth is never, ever meant to be a dead-end reservoir. It is meant to be a flowing river that blesses others and actually changes the world for the better. Since Jesus taught that where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, I want to leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap up this explainer. Look at your calendar, look at your bank statements, and ask yourself honestly, where's your treasure? Do your possessions own you, or do you serve God with them? Ultimately, does your money serve you, or do you serve it? Thanks so much for exploring this with me today. I really hope this deep dive helps you see your resources and your heart in a completely new light.